Hi, my name is Michael Morrow, and I'll be presenting on Dr. Saul Axelrod. I chose him because he's basically like a pioneer of behavior analysis. He's had a long, storied career where um, he's really worked to not only practice but also to promote his field, and I thought it was pretty interesting. This is him. Um, I'll start with a quote. Over the past 60 years, applied behavior analysis (ABA) has made notable contributions to the literature involving populations with developmental disabilities. And this is in his 2012 journal, Applied Behavior Analysis, Autism and Beyond. Um, in this journal, I'll talk about a little more later. He kind of promotes applied behavior analysis. He's very good at that and what he's done. He does. I chose a couple articles where he kind of promotes it, notes the accomplishments, but we'll get more into that later. We'll start with his education, his accolades. He started his educational journey in college at Temple, which is where you'll see he ends up working in the future. But he got a bachelor's in mathematics, and after Temple, he studied at Florida State, where he earned a master's in psychology. He must have liked the warm instead of Pennsylvania, so he stayed at Florida State and continued to study and earning his doctorate of education. After that, he went on to his career, and I just kind of wanted to highlight some awards right away, just so you could see kind of his importance and how highly regarded he is in the ABA community. In 2006, he was the first recipient of the Michael Hemingway Award for Distinguished Service, and that was by the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. And additionally, in 2012, a year after he retired, he was awarded the Enduring Achievement Award by the Pennsylvania Association for Behavior Analysis. This is a little bit of his life and career. He spent 39 years of his 46-year career at Temple University. So that doesn't count his undergrad as well and any research he did. He was a professor there from 1972 to 2011 when he retired. He was a professor of special education. He contributed to over 10 books and 60 academic journals. I bring up about 6 of them in this presentation, and we'll get to those soon. He's credited for researching and writing across the disciplines of education and psychology, and that's another one of the reasons I wanted to talk about him. That was my undergrad, was education, and I'm going for my master's special ed now on the behavior analyst track. So his work is pretty relevant to what I'd like to accomplish in my career. He worked extremely hard to take the complex world, as we all know, of ABA and simplify it, which is something I think we could all agree that we could use right now for teachers to understand and implement procedures. I'm not saying teachers can't understand ABA. I'm saying that they could do it without the extensive training that is usually required, or taking a semester course where you have to learn all the terms and everything like that. Some of his publications. The first one's Functional and Structural Analysis of Behavior. This is approaches leading to reduced use of punishment procedures. This is an interesting read. It was from 1987, so it's a little old, but it had some good insight on how the past behavior analysts would use things like restraints and punishment instead of positive reinforcement or extinction and things like that. It was really interesting to read, and it's kind of like at that time a brand new idea that people weren't really getting into because it just wasn't common in ABA at that point. He also notes that at the end, it's a little more self-promotion at the end of the article. He talks about how people are more impressed if you're able to control or alter someone's behavior if you're able to not use punishment in the procedures. He said that punishments, I interpret it as kind of saying like punishment's almost a bailout. The next one is identification of behavioral function in public schools and clarification of terms. This is also an interesting read. It kind of focuses around the center of the IDEA Act enacted by George Bush. And it basically goes over the difference between a functional behavioral assessment and just functional analysis. It kind of simplifies the differences for teachers and people who are planning to use those in the schools. And it's pretty interesting. And that's kind of the theme of his publications is with education, tying the two together and making it easier for teachers to read and understand and implement procedures. Increasing teachers' use of one-to-one praise-to-behavior correction ratio to decrease student disruption in general education classrooms. Typically in education, the article says that people use an 8-to-1 or 4-to-1 praise-to-behavior correction ratio, and he found it very beneficial to use a 1-to-1. He took 3 different teachers, all whom don't really use a correction ratio correctly or often, and noticed the big difference in their classrooms if they used a 1-to-1 rather than an 8-to-1 or 4-to-1, which is widely accepted in education. Applied Behavior Analysis, Autism and Beyond. This is one of the 2 articles I chose where it's a lot of promotion of ABA, kind of goes over the accomplishments and the contributions that applied behavior analysis has made to the especially autism community. And that was recent. He had credit for this after he had already retired from Temple. The contributions of applied behavior analysis to the education of people with autism, you can tell by the title, it's similar to the one before. Autism and Beyond kind of just goes through the contributions to that point. So this is 2001, so he works for about another 10 to 11 years afterwards, but he kind of talks about the advancements that behavior analysis has made and how much they've contributed to not only helping people with autism, but increasing the awareness of autism spectrum disorder. And the last one I chose, because it relates to me, it's drug treatment for hyperactivities, controversies, alternatives, and guidelines. I chose this because at age 19, I was diagnosed with ADHD and put on medication for it. I noticed a difference for sure in my performance in school and at work because of I took Vyvanse and then gone into taking Adderall. But this article kind of focuses on his approach or alternative approaches, and basically saying that doctors have kind of not gotten lazy, but they take the medication route too quickly. Axelrod believes that these things could be solved with some behavior alterations or some different strategies to help instead of medication. He also kind of he's got a negative tone towards medications like Adderall and Vyvanse because he says how drug companies are kind of pushing their drugs, and it makes it easy for the doctors and physicians to easily diagnose someone or maybe misdiagnose and put them on the prescription. So I thought that was an interesting read. His common themes are he's pretty consistent across the board in his research. I only noted the extra 2 because I enjoyed reading his basically promotion. He's what I like to say is like ABA's biggest cheerleader. He's very good at self-promotion of his career and our careers going forward. He focused on the relationship between behavior analysis and education. Another reason why I wanted to choose him because we're in both fields. This was a big one that I thought he does a great job at. It simplifies the terms and procedures for teachers to implement without extensive training. He's not saying that teachers can't understand these. I kind of mentioned this already, but he's saying that if you can simplify it and make teachers easier to understand, they can implement the procedures and make a big difference in their classroom. He's also focused on improving the lives of students in the classroom and at home, most notably focused on working with kids in poverty, and also a lot about kids suffering with self-injurious behaviors. I thought he did a really good job of, making procedures and other strategies that help kids in the classroom. And I think it's very notable to try to help kids in poverty and especially kids suffering from self-injurious behaviors. And then the last one's promotion. He did promote ABA, which helps everyone. Honestly, ABA wasn't regarded as like the greatest form of science or behavioral science back in the day, but now it's a highly regarded field. And these 2 articles, he really, really backs up and promotes, the improvements and advancements that behavior analysis or analysts have made over the last 60 years since it's really picked up. My interview questions, the first one was, what was the proudest moment of your long storied career? He had a 46-year career. It's pretty impressive. And I wanted to also know, like, what would you like to see from the future? What would you want to see from people like us who are trying to go on and become board certified? How's the ABA changed since you started your career? What do you think are the biggest accomplishments since you've been practicing? So over those 46 years, ABA has changed so much, and obviously he's had a lot to do with that. So I kind of just want to know what's changed, what's gotten better, maybe what's gotten worse, and what do you think his accomplishments are? In your opinion, is learning how to speak behavioral language fluently really as important as we're taught? This kind of goes back to a module we did earlier in the semester. It's in the Johnston book where a young woman talks to her teacher about how important it really is to be able to speak fluently in behavioral language. I just want to know from someone who's got this kind of pedigree, and I thought it'd be kind of an interesting question or maybe an answer. This was kind of related to me. Your article, Drug Treatment for Hyperactivity, focuses on children being medicated to alter their behavior rather than seeing a behavior analyst. Do you see this, and by this I mean medicating, as a downward trend in the future? As someone who takes Adderall for ADHD at age 24, me, and would like to stop using it, me, how would you proceed? I asked this personal question. I kind of do want to know. I've heard since I've been diagnosed, they've been over or misdiagnosing people. I would assume a lot of college kids are getting smart, and not that they're not already smart, but going to the doctor saying they have the symptoms of someone with ADHD, and who knows? I've heard stories of people getting diagnosed that probably don't actually have ADHD, but I just want to know if he thinks it'll be a downward trend. That's my personal opinion. I think it will. And my last question is, obviously, how could teachers benefit from taking courses focusing on ABA? I think it would be very beneficial if during your gen ed or during your undergrad, when you're learning different strategies and things, if ABA had influence in those classrooms, I think it would benefit not only the universities, but also the teachers that they're putting out into the communities. In conclusion, Dr. Axelrod has been extremely crucial to the success and improvements of ABA over the last 40 years of his career, 46 exactly. Perhaps his biggest accomplishment is almost bridging the gap between ABA and a classroom setting, and providing simplified strategies, really, and procedures to teachers has benefited so many students. I don't know where his reach ends, but I'm sure it's huge. And then finally, he's just been a huge advocate for ABA and really done his part as behavior analyst to promote its practices and its image. We don't really know where we'd be without Dr. Axelrod. So I guess for that we have to thank him. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a little bit. And sorry if it looked like I'm looking straight ahead, but my computer's very odd and has a webcam in the corner. So have a good night. Bye.